Investigating the Jack the Ripper, new suspect.
On a street in London, and the
New suspect. I mean, what's the new suspect? Because that man is dead. Like, I understand they probably want to get closure for, like, past stuff. But he did. He did.
the 1880s.
He murked.
It's night, it's spooky, and you get killed. Want to know by who? Well, you'll never know.
Because you got killed
Well,
by Jack the Ripper. Jack was
yeah, he literally, like, he's got the name for a reason. He literally ripped the women's in half, pretty much. They said he was definitely a doctor, which makes sense. That he's a doctor, because he did things in surgical ways, you know?
was the first serial killer to really be popular in the news.
He was, like, he was the most surgical dude on Earth, like, at that moment. He gave meaning to that phrase. Surgical. Like, damn, he's so surgical.
Confirmed to murder and brutally mutilate 5 women,
that's okay.
It could have possibly been many more. And the craziest part about all of this is even today, 140 years later, no one ever found out the identity behind Jack the Ripper. So today, we're going to go to the locations of the 5 official murders, go through the clues, suspects, and talk to an expert about a new lead he has, all to possibly figure out who was behind Jack the Ripper.
My name's Mick Priestley, and I'm the author of Jack the Ripper, One Autumn in Whitechapel, which is an extremely in-depth account of the Jack the Ripper case.
I'm excited. I want to wait till later, but I'm really excited to ask who you think the man was.
It's a guy that nobody's ever suggested before.
Oh, wow. All right, so we're going to just start by going to the locations where the murders happened and kind of going through the story that way.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
One thing I want to do before we get into that is I want to break down the scenery of what London looked like in the 1880s. So this is all took place in the area of Whitechapel, London, where we are right now. This area in the 1880s was like miserable. London went from 1 million people to 5 million people in a short span of time. So in this area, there were 30,000 people lived in 3 squared miles. Everyone was extremely poor.
Yeah, I guess you couldn't go on TikTok Live and make money, huh?
Yeah, there was.
Yeah, they were very poor, and he would do things to certain type of women, and those women did certain things to get money because they needed money. Like he said, very poor.
No, there was no Spider-Man. Ice cream, yummy. They basically had places you could like live at that like your bed, it was just a rope. It was for like drunk people, and they would like lean over the rope and sleep like this, like the Fent pose. The Fent pose kind of. And that's where the phrase hangover comes from. So that was just like what the poor people would be buying. So they would be inside at least.
That's
wild. If you were outside, it was like, it was chilly. It's quite brisk out this evening, Nad. And then
Lad, I think it's quite brisk and hot.
This all started August 31st, 1888, when the body of Mary Ann Nichols was found on Bucks Row, or today, Newark Street.
Who had last been seen leaving a pub on the corner of Brick Lane. She was then seen making her way out onto Whitechapel High Street at about 2:30 in the morning. She was then found dead about an hour and 10 minutes later. She was found originally by a guy called Charles Cross. He was actually making his way up the street.
It's him. It was Charles Cross. What if it was like one of the detectives in the department? You feel me? Or it was one of the they had morgues, right? People in the morgues.
Heading this way, he noticed something lying exactly where we're standing, but it was that dark, so it was a very poorly lit area of the street. The fact that he was on the other side of the road and didn't realize it was a woman, he thought it was a rolled up sheet or something. He then heard footsteps coming from behind him. It was a guy called Robert Paul. He said, "Hey mate, look, her legs were wide apart, her clothes were pulled up." He said he thinks she's still breathing, and then went, "Well, I've got to get to work. And if we see a policeman, we'll tell them about it." They met a PC Jonas Meisen. He then came down, by which point a PC John Thane had also arrived, and that's where the whole case began.
When they found the body of Mary, she had multiple incisions running down her stomach. This is a trend you would start to see a lot more and a lot worse in the later murders. And this all would give us a good idea of who Jack was. But after Mary Ann, Mick took us to a spot that is not an official murder of Jack the Ripper, but he really seems to think it was done by him. And hopefully this will offer more clues.
3 weeks earlier, there'd been the murder of Martha Tabram down in Gunthorpe Street. She was found on the first floor landing of a building called the George Yard Building. Whoever had murdered her, he'd entered the building with her onto the first floor landing. She'd been stabbed 30
Did he create the phased? I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say the phrase. I'm not gonna say it. But hopefully you understand what I'm talking about.
9 times, and she was lying
Ripped.
in the same manner as Mary Ann
He
Nichols.
literally
That murder
ripped
of
her
Martha
apart.
Tabram had made a
said it.
minor ripple in the newspapers, and then later on in the case, when he strikes again, then it became a sensation in the newspapers.
And is it true that he was like, in a way, the first media serial killer? Like he was the first serial killer to be, I guess, like publicized?
Like, it wasn't the first serial killer case in this area,
Yeah.
but it was far and away the most notorious, with what you would sort of see as like a modern tabloid press following it.
This is a random kind of off-topic question, but this is our first time in London. Do people get shanked a lot here? Is that real?
People say, I mean, you do have that, but it tends to be like gang stuff.
Okay.
So they don't have the guns.
So
over
we're chilling. We're not gonna get
here.
shanked.
No, I'm absolutely fine.
Just 8 days later, on September 8th, 1888, a resident on Hanbury Street stumbled across the body of Annie Chapman, the second official murder.
This side, they leveled it in 1970 to make way for the, there's a Truman Brewery market behind here. But if you've been here in 1888, number 29 used to stand right here, and it was in the yard of number 29 that the murder took place.
He said the most interesting murder to him was, I think, the second one, because he said it was like done when it was almost daylight.
At that time of the morning, the sun was coming up. There were 17 people lived in the house in 8 different rooms. But whoever the killer was, he's gone in through the front door with Annie Chapman, through into the backyard, and that's where the murder took place. She was found lying on her back with her head to the side, one hand across her chest, but her intestines had been pulled from inside her and were actually lying across her right shoulder. Small parts of her abdomen had actually been cut from inside her. Her legs were wide apart like Mary Ann Nichols. Her clothes were pulled up
He's a
chest
freaky,
high like
freaky
Mary
dude.
Ann Nichols. Her
That's what I
throat
know.
had been
Man, he's
cut
a freak.
violently, and he must have been there, according to doctor's reports, for 5 or 10 minutes to inflict those sort of injuries, with the sun coming up, in full danger of anybody coming out.
Already here you can see that it was pretty obvious to tell which murders in Whitechapel were done by Jack because of these terrible ways that he would mutilate the bodies.
It's like mixed opinion on if he knew what he was doing by cutting out the organs and stuff, or if he kind of just was like pulling it out. I think you would have to have some knowledge, but maybe, I don't know.
The police at the time never said that he had any sort of medical training, and the police doctor had said that he didn't possess the skill of a butcher or a horse slaughterer. It was the police's opinion that absolutely anybody could have done it.
And this night would be very interesting because it was the
Who
only
is this
time
man
that
rising
Jack
dripped
killed
out?
2
Like,
people
damn.
in the same night, called the double event. 22 days later, and just a few minutes walk away, the third confirmed murder took place, where the body of Elizabeth Stride was found on September 30th, 1888.
Pretty much exactly
How many
where
bodies?
these
There were
gates
5 of them?
opened, a place
Okay.
called
That's-
Goodfield Yard. 9 feet behind the gates, lying right here in
It's
what
definitely not
was
more than
Goodfield
5.
Yard, is where Elizabeth
I don't
Stride was
actually have
discovered
many.
at about 1:01.
But
She
yeah.
was found by a guy called Louis Deemschutz. He came down here, he was pulling into the yard with a pony and cart, and when he got into here, he found the pony stopped, shied to the left.
He couldn't see the body. They just noticed that the horse like kind of freaked out. So he lit a match and he had to get like right next to the body.
In the brief moment of light he had, he saw that there was a woman lying on the floor.
Think of how dark that has to be.
Oh,
You have to
yeah.
light a match. Like I light a match and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Ethan.
Yeah, but I'm black. You can't see me.
Okay, that was not the point I was trying to make. Are y'all filming a movie? Yeah, we're trying to find Jack the Ripper, dude. Have you seen him? Yeah. Who's scarier, Jack the Ripper or Jack
It
Doherty?
could be
He
his
went into the
descendant.
side door of the club, which was the
Dude's a
kitchen door here,
sociopath.
went inside and said, "There's somebody outside in the yard. You
Psychopath.
need to check it out."
He's
They
all
came out with
wrong.
a
He's a
lamp,
narcissist.
like
He's
a
everything.
lantern lamp, and found her lying
definitely
here,
a
9
narcissist.
feet behind the
Oh
gates,
my.
like Annie Chapman.
That's given.
Had one hand placed across her chest, her eyes were wide open, smeared the blood from a throat injury across her hand and her forearm. Sometimes people think she wasn't mutilated because him with his pony and cart had disturbed her and he hid behind the gate or something. I think he's done it as quickly as he could, impulsively, and then taken off running. And I think he probably went that way and around that corner. Otherwise, there were a number of witnesses in the street you'd have had to somehow miss if he went that way. The guys that ran to the top of the street, where they found a PC Henry Lamb. PC Lamb came down into the yard, sealed the place off. Nobody was leaving, nobody was coming in.
Wasn't there a letter about how he said he was gonna chop off the ear and give it to the police? Was that confirmed real or?
What you're talking about is a letter called the Dear Boss letter.
Basically, these letters believed to be sent by Jack, and they talked about what he was going to do
Interesting.
with the next victim. And the most important part is they were always signed Jack the Ripper, which is actually how he got his name. However,
The killer had actually severed the bottom part,
he's a
like
crazy
one of
dude.
the earlobes. So some people say, you see, there it is. But the letter
But my thing is, why wasn't there like a neighborhood watch or something like that. Why do people not like try to wait and catch him? Like, what's up with that?
Just said, I will clip the lady's ears off and send to police from the next job I do. At that one in Mitre Square, he didn't clip her ears off. He seems to have removed the bottom part, but didn't take it with him. So the first school of thought is, oh yeah, the killer wrote it. It's totally legit. The second school of thought is that it was a guy called Thomas Bulling. And Thomas Bulling was the boss of the newspaper agency. The letter was addressed to the boss at the Central News Office. He's the guy that went, hey, look at this letter I've got.
So he was trying to just like get his newspaper
I think he was.
viral. Man, we gotta use tactics like that to get more views.
I have seen another letter written by Thomas Bulling talking about something completely different, and the handwriting looks amazingly similar.
Oh,
I'm convinced it's him.
So because these letters weren't likely actually from the real murder, this shows us that Jack didn't really care about the media attention, which would be really important for figuring out the identity of Jack the Ripper, but there were still more clues to look into. And this isn't the only weird thing to come from this night. After Jack murders and only slightly mutilates Elizabeth, which is uncommon, it seemed like that didn't satisfy him, because that very same night and just 2 miles away, the fourth confirmed murder of Catherine Eddowes took place.
Roughly a 12-minute walk from the scene in Berners Street in Dudfield's Yard. This is Mitre Square.
It's kind of crazy that they have like schools now at a lot of these places.
The school was here at the time.
I feel like I would be terrified as a kid. Someone tells you, hey, there was Jack the Ripper was here.
Yeah,
I feel like
like,
they
well,
all tell each other that, but in their like little UK accent. Hey, bruv, did you know Jack the Ripper was here? And he kills people.
This is where we would get a big clue to who Jack was,
murdered them,
because 3
folks.
men were standing outside at the time and actually saw Catherine Eddowes with a man right before she was murdered.
The lady described him as being a white guy in his late 20s. He had a
Around
small
30 years
grey
old,
flat
a
cap
grey
with a
flat
peak.
top,
He had a
like
small
that.
fair mustache, a fair complexion, it was said, a red neckerchief around his neck, and a pepper and salt jacket on. About 9 minutes after that, according to PC Watkins' estimations, he said he came back along Mitre Street. He came up into the square, and this time found the appallingly mutilated body of Catherine Eddowes lying right here in the corner, exactly where we're standing.
And if you think getting seen by 3 men was a big slip up by Jack, he was about to make an even bigger slip up.
She was lying on her back with both hands by her sides. Her head had been turned to the left, legs wide apart, clothes pulled up. Her intestines had actually been pulled off and were pulled out and were placed across her right shoulder. A 2.5-foot section of her colon had been removed from inside her and was lying here on the ground between the left arm and the body.
He got
There were a number
caught,
of
but
stab
no
and
one
slash
decided
injuries to
to
the
take
face.
him in
Her left
and question
kidney
him?
was missing, a womb was missing, half of an apron she'd been wearing had been cut away. It seems that the killer must have wrapped her organs in it to take them with him.
Bro took them.
The missing
What?
part of her apron was actually found here by a PC Alfred Long. It's the only point in the entire case that the killer left a clue with his own hand for everybody to find, and nobody disputes that. It absolutely was the missing part of her apron that was missing from Mitre Square.
What was the motive like behind that?
I think he might possibly have not wished to be seen carrying a blood-stained packet of organs if he's going to pass one of these high streets.
Do you know much about the reasoning for why he was taking these organs, why he was mutilating the bodies the way he was?
In a modern case, they would say he's a sexually motivated serial killer. He's killing all women. All of the parts he's stabbing are parts he might like, sort of in between her thighs, in between her legs, putting himself in great danger to do this, and yet he feels compelled to stay at the scene to act this out. And this implies it's very important to him to do this to get his full sexual gratification out of his crime scene. He didn't just wake up this morning out of nowhere and think, that's it, I'm going murdering.
Yeah.
He would spend years. It's something he's seen, heard, or read about influences him, and it sits in his brain, and he's just thinking about it, fantasizing about it, perving over it, rehearsing in his head the things that he'd like to do. So the fact that the murders then end and you don't see any more of that really would imply he did eventually disappear.
Do we know anything about the disappearance or like why he disappeared?
So imagine he lives by himself at the time of the murders, but then the landlord kicks him out and he's got to come move in with all of us. He's not going to be able to stay out middle of the night and come home with gore and body
That's
parts.
crazy
looking
to
all
think
suspicious.
that's like what would stop one of the biggest.
And then the
Crazy.
5th and final confirmed murder, and the most brutal by far, took place on November 9th,
Mary Jane.
1888.
a guy called Thomas Boyer arrived at Mary Kelly's door to collect the rent money. He went
Jane
down,
Doe.
banged on the door, no answer, tried the door, it was locked. He went round to the side to where there was a broken window pane. He put his hand through the window, there was a coat on the other side that was acting as a curtain, pulled that back and looking on into the room, saw the horribly mutilated body of Mary Kelly lying on the bed inside. So this one was by far the most violent of the Jack the Ripper murders. Police believed he must have been there for at least 2 hours, whereas he's maybe spending 5 minutes of these things in the street. At this particular crime scene, we kind of see similar things to what we'd seen before, but to a much worse extent. She was lying on her back with her legs wide apart, one hand across the chest, head to the side, eyes wide open. Her intestines had been pulled from inside her and were actually lying across her right shoulder. There were organs from inside her body arranged around her on the bed. A liver was lying in between her feet. Both of her breasts and the muscles attached to them, the doctor's report said, had been removed with roughly circular incisions. Organs and strips of flesh from the body were actually hanging in nails from the wall and had been draped over the back of the chairs. People often say that the murder of Mary Kelly here was the last one that took place. And it totally wasn't. There was the murder of Alice Mackenzie and Francis Coles that took place afterwards that were attributed to the same killer. But this one here on Dorset Street was far and away the most violent.
And with all of that, we now have a pretty good description of Jack.
So after all of the cases, this is kind of the description they got for Jack the Ripper.
Interesting.
White male, age 28 to 36, likely of average intelligence, probably appeared with poor personal hygiene. Damn, they're just roasting him. Single, never married, difficulty interacting with people, especially women. Nocturnal? I don't know, we're pretty nocturnal. It's 2:30 a.m. right now.
Oh, they're drinking 5 energy drinks.
And now that we finally had everything, it was time to go over the suspects.
Well, if you were to Google Jack the Ripper suspect, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of names. The police at the time, there were only really a couple of suspects at the time. There was a guy called John Pizer, who was briefly known as the Leather Apron, and he was known to threaten women in the street with a knife.
He's a good killer.
It turned out he was this bonehead street mugger guy.
It was just all talk. He's a yapper.
There was then a guy called Jacob Eisenschmidt, and he was known as the Mad Butcher of Holloway. His wife had contacted the police after the murder of Annie Chapman. They said he's lost the plot, he's drunk all the time, he's always carrying big knives on him, and he hangs out at this pub in Whitechapel on Wentworth Street. There was a hunt on to find him. They caught him, he was taken to court. The judge said he was a dangerous man, and he was sectioned in the psychiatric loony bin, and then the murders kept going, so it couldn't have been him afterwards.
Walter Sickert, the artist. I remember a certain failed artist that was not a good person. He painted prostitutes, which some believe contain clues about the murders. Has a painting called Jack the Ripper in his bedroom. Wait, pause. Suwern Kowalski. He lived in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. He worked as a barber under an alias. He was later convicted of poisoning his three wives. Jesus. Whoa. So, I don't know, it seems like he was kind of a bad dude. Karl Feigenbaum. This was a German merchant sailor. He was suspicious because he confessed to mutilating women. Oh my, well, that's pretty bad. Records show
that's
he
pretty
was
bad.
working in Whitechapel at the dates of the murders. Even his own lawyer believed he could have been Jack the Ripper. Jesus, dude. His lawyer was, Jayoma was not doing his job. He should have.
Okay, well, I think the guy is someone that hasn't been contacted by the police, you know? Like, it's a dude that was never got in trouble with the law. You know, because if you got in trouble with the law, you're already an idiot.
Have had Jayoma. To me, the most suspicious person of this is either the guy that mutilated women, which, actually, I take him out of it. Because if he confessed to that, then at that point, he just confessed to being Jack the Ripper.
Facts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The guy that has a Jack the Ripper painting in his room, I feel like that's kind of like a sick fan. It's like the scene in Incredibles where he tears down the poster.
There are a few other popular conspiracies that I'll put over on my second channel, and if you look anywhere online, people seem to think there's a man named Aaron Kosminski. But out of all of these suspects, which by far are who people think is most likely, Mick had someone that nobody talks about.
When I put my book out, I was researching.
Dude, he's from the UK and he's wearing a tough-ass friend.
Necessarily, but I would find out once and for all.
White Sox.
It's clearly not this guy at all. And then here's Albert Backett. And here he is again. Here he is again. And Albert Backett, age, he fits the right description. He's got a criminal record for all the things you'd expect a serial killer to have today. He told the police he'd met the killer and spoke to him twice. He said the killer was writing letters to his house to threaten him and warn him of murders. He then turned up by himself, completely uninvited, to the inquest of Francis Coles, demanding to be on the jury just when the jury were about to be taken to view a body in the mortuary. Threw such a big fit when they wouldn't let him that the coroner told him if he didn't sit down and behave himself, he was going to have the police remove him from the building. But he worked as an engraver. But the reason that's interesting is because I found 4 women in the area who all got attacked but got away. And it was always the same story. They'd been sleeping rough 3, 4 in the morning in this area when you'd met this guy who'd offered you this money to go with him, and he presented you with these valuable looking coins, and he'd seemed like Mr. Nice until you got to that dark deserted spot, and then he flipped. They'd struggled and screamed and he ran away, and then you realise these coins he'd given you were bogus, polished super brightly to look like gold coins when they totally weren't. Albert Backett, as a copper plate engraver with years of experience, would absolutely have had all the tools and the knowledge.
So I got a question. Do you think that the case will ever officially be solved?
No, I don't think they're ever going to officially solve it in the same way. I mean,
This
there are
can't
countless
be
other
solved
cases
anymore.
throughout history that'll never be solved anyway. I think until somebody comes along with some mind-boggling evidence, I think it's clearly Albert Backett, and nobody's ever suggested it before.
I'll be 100% honest, I have not dedicated nearly enough time to say really much on this, but this guy that Mick told us, Aaron, claiming to meet Jack, getting letters from him, then also having metalworking experience where the survivors would see fake coins right before they got attacked, seems incredibly suspicious. And also, just Jack the Ripper as a whole.
Before I knew much about the Jack the Ripper, I was like, oh, genius guy. He was getting away with all these killings and stuff. But like talking to this expert now, it literally seems like he was just lucky. I thought everything was like really detailed. I thought he was super smart, but it literally seems like he was just like walking home, see someone alone, like just murder them, do whatever you wanted, and somehow like run away. And like, it's crazy what you could get away with. I'd pirate a movie. FBI's at my door, dude. I'd get illegal gems on Clash of Clans. FBI's on my door.
I may be a little biased, but I think it was definitely him. But what do you guys think? And by the way, guys, please really go subscribe to Mick's channel. It is honestly amazing, and he carried this video.
I am still trying to collab with
Interesting. Let's check that guy's channel out. Maybe we'll like. Oh, these are short. London Bridge ended up. Oh, the guy that literally left his head off. Whoa. Cool. Okay, this guy's neat. UK still celebrates his 400-year-old failure. Interesting. I'm just gonna stay this dude because he's got like fire fits. Like this man is like dripped out. So that's tough.